This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 99 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today's episode is all about close calls when travelling. So when things kind of go wrong or very nearly go wrong and you have a kind of impactful story to tell, let's say. I feel like so far, touch wood, I've been very lucky and I haven't really had any of these kind of real close shaves on my travels. I've never had anything really go badly wrong. I mean, I know I have a habit of kind of forgetting even when things go slightly wrong. I have a fairly rose-coloured glasses kind of outlook on these things, but I have been lucky to never have faced something more sinister or scary or anything. This will make more sense when you hear what has happened to the guests in today's episode, especially Pam, my first one. But before we get to those close calls when travelling, I have to tell you something exciting. Our Boxu arrived. You might remember that this month, the sponsor of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast is Boxu, and Boxu sends out a monthly subscription of Japanese snacks. And my son and I were very, very excited when our Boxu arrived. And, of course, it was actually just before dinner time. We got home and found it had been delivered. And I was the nagging mother and like, no, you can't have any until after dinner. And he's like, please, please. And so we did try a couple of our Boxu snacks. So it comes in a very cool, bright orange box, and it's full of very, very cool snacks. That's pretty much how I can describe it. Both sweet and savoury. Actually, I've been surprised. Even despite my sweet tooth, I have been won over by a couple of the savoury ones. So my son and I discussed this, and my favourite was the scallion miso senbei. So senbei is like a kind of a rice cracker. We keep laughing about it because when we went to Nara, you could feed the deer shika senbei, so deer crackers, I suppose. So for my son, senbei is something you give to the deer. But this one was amazing. And my son decided his favourite, so far, I might add, because we haven't tried all of them, is the Nagoya caramel sandwich cookie. You might remember this box this month is snacks from Nagoya. So that was his favourite. And I have to say, I did also think that was an awesome snack. So we are very much enjoying our Boxu. And if you want to try your own Boxu, don't forget that you can use the discount code THOUGHT5 to get $5 off anything you order. And they're at boxu.com. So thank you, Boxu. Our taste buds and stomachs are enjoying you immensely. So back to the close calls when travelling, and my first guest today is Pam Lynch. Now, Pam's a good friend of mine here in Perth, and she first started this kind of adventurous travel as she decided to trek to Everest Base Camp to celebrate her 60th birthday, having never done anything remotely like that ever, or even being, particularly physically active or anything. So she went on this trek to Everest Base Camp, and then a couple of years later, she decided to do it again, and it's that second trip that she tells us about in this story today.
It was a very eventful trip. To be honest, to this day, I don't know why I decided to go back a second time. Various things, but yes, I decided to head back and do a more difficult trek this time to Everest Base Camp, which would take me round up summiting Gokyo-ri, which is at about 4,000 metres, and then over the Chola Pass. As I say, much more difficult, and it turned even more difficult because the weather initially decided to throw everything at us, and we had a lot of snow. We did get to the top of Gokyo-ri, but we weren't able to go across the Chola Pass because we got snowed out, and we had to backtrack. It was an horrendous day backtracking. What had taken us 4 days to get up there, we went back in one. And it was awful. Snowing. Visibility was down to just about zero for most of the day. It was the worst day I've ever had out trekking. Yeah. We did, get around the rest of it and got successfully back to Kathmandu. But then I was still in Kathmandu when Mother Nature, bless her, decided to throw one more curveball at me. And the major earthquake hit in April 2015. It was on Anzac Day, actually, for any Australians.
Easy to remember.
It was on the 100th anniversary of
yes,
Anzac
indeed.
Day.
Yes, gosh.
So I was there for that. Bizarrely, though, it's one of those occasions when you come away thinking, I was meant to be there for some reason. Because that day I had planned to go into the centre of Tamil, which is the tourist district of Kathmandu, and I was going to go and see an ancient tower that I'd not been to visit before, and possibly climb up it. You could climb up to a viewing platform. For some reason, I changed my mind. I decided to spend the day just pottering about, and after breakfast I went over to the hotel and decided to read for a while, and that's where I was sitting when the earthquake hit. Now, it was horrendous, but that, I found out later, that ancient tower came down, and there were several people actually killed. And I still get goosebumps.
I still get goosebumps, and I've heard you talk about it, yeah.
But yes, it was. I was sitting in the lobby of the hotel, and you just knew instantly what was happening, and I just did not stop to think. I got up and ran for the doors. Bizarrely enough, still clutching my book with my finger in the page. You
don't want to lose where you're up to. I totally understand.
It was the book written by Edmund Hillary as well, so that made it. But yeah, dashed for the doors. Now that hotel was swaying above me. And I didn't know at the time. We found out later that it was built to the highest earthquake standards. So
Thank goodness.
Was good, but you didn't know that.
No, of course not.
And you can just imagine everything tumbling down on top of you. Made it through the glass doors of the hotel out into the car park, And I remember I was one of the first out there, and I remember clinging to the arms of some random hotel employee. He was. I don't know who he was or where he went to after
nearest,
that. And then sinking to the ground because there were constant aftershocks, and you just sink to the ground because you can't go any further then. Basically. Spent that night camped out in the hotel car park. There came a point, about 5 or 6 hours after the main earthquake, that we were allowed back into the hotel if we wanted to go back in, which most of us didn't.
No.
I made a dash up to my room, grabbed my luggage and back down.
Passport and everything, so
down to the car park, and we camped out. A lot of us camped out in the car park that night. And then the following morning, I was due to fly out the following day. The people that had organised the trek that I was on were awesome. A couple of the guys turned up at the hotel to make sure, there was myself and a couple of others there to make sure we were all okay. Somehow or another, they managed to bundle us onto a minibus and take us to the airport. And that's when it became obvious how much devastation there was. We'd been cocooned in the hotel for a while there. And to drive down those roads with buildings crumbled and people sitting on the curbs, and it was a real eye-opener. Did eventually get out of Kathmandu, but the experience at the airport, which is notoriously chaotic at the best of times, that again was horrendous. There was another major aftershock when we were sitting there. I think it was about 6.4, 6.8 aftershock.
That's pretty major.
Sitting in
a crowded airport.
This rickety airport, because it's not built anywhere near the Radisson Hotel was.
Yes.
And thinking, oh God, we've got this far. We're not going to get any further. Took a couple of hours, but eventually we did get out of there. Which, a cheer went up on the plane.
I bet.
Obviously, when we did.
Yes,
we did
when you're off that ground, off that shaky ground.
Exactly, and on our way sort of thing. But I think my biggest concern at that point was for my family back in Perth. Because I knew I was okay. I knew I was going to get home somehow eventually.
Yes.
but I'd only been able to have a brief conversation with one of my daughters before it had cut out. One of the guys at the hotel very kindly loaned his phone to people because otherwise there was no communication. So the plan had been that there was a 4-hour stopover in Singapore. So I thought, well, when I get there, I can call them, let them know.
They don't have to stress for too much longer.
Exactly. But we were so late leaving Kathmandu that getting to Singapore, it was a run through the airport to get the connecting flight. So they didn't even know whether I was on that flight or not. They were waiting at Perth Airport, and there was a message waiting on my phone when I turned it on, and there were tears and everything once I got through, but it was...
I bet they were really crazy glad to see you.
Oh, yes, and they did take my passport off me there as well. Let me carry all your paperwork, Mum. Got it.
She's not leaving for a while.
The implication you're not going to go and do this again. So, yes. So that, I think, as I say, I believe I was meant to be there, but not meant to, wasn't my time, so to speak.
Because it so could have been if you'd just gone off sightseeing like you planned. It could have been
something
such a different
stopped
story.
Me. And to be perfectly honest, I was intending originally when I made my plans to come home a couple of days earlier than that. But I decided to stay a couple of days to do a bit more sightseeing. So it's given me a totally different perspective on life and the need to do what we want to do now and not put it off and say, we'll do that when we retire, or we'll do that when the kids have left home, or when we've got enough money. You've got to make things happen.
Absolutely.
Now, because you don't know what's around the corner.
It's a very valuable lesson.
You see these people living in places like Kathmandu who have got very little to start with, and then to have a lot of it taken away because houses and buildings were destroyed. Thousands, near on 9,000 people lost their lives in Nepal. So it makes you a lot more grateful for what you have. And I think travel in general can do that for you as well.
Absolutely. You don't have to have the earthquake to give you that insight, but that puts it into a very stark kind of contrast.
It does.
Well, I did say in our chat that I still get goosebumps when I hear Pam talk about this, and I still got more goosebumps when I was listening to this recording again. So it's one of those stories that I could hear endlessly, I think, and it reminds me every time that you've got to make things happen in life, as Pam said. In fact, I recently read Pam's book, How the Hell Did I Get Here? And if you want to hear more about Pam's journeys in at Everest, then I think it's well worth a read. So I'll put a link in the show notes to that as well. So on to the next story, and today that's from Margarita Pass from the Margarita Gypsy blog. It's her first time on the Thoughtful Travel podcast. We had a fabulous chat a couple of weeks ago. She was a lot of fun to talk to. She's originally from Poland and currently living in, I'm pretty sure, Florida, and I want to say Miami, but I'd have to double check that. Anyway, she's living in the US at the moment. But this story was about a close shave she had in Namibia. And she did confess it was not a very well-planned trip. She was going to South Africa and decided to kind of add on a trip to Namibia while she was there. And it was only like 10 days or a week or so before she left that her boss at the time happened to say, don't you need a visa for Namibia? And she's like, I don't know, I don't think so. She looked it up and was like, yes, she had to get a visa, had to send her passport to Washington, got the passport back with the visa the day before the flight. One of those kind of trips, sometimes spontaneity is good, sometimes spontaneity can be a bit risky. And that's kind of what this story from Margarita is all about.
The story is that once I was in capital, which probably I'm keep pronouncing it wrong, Windhoek. Then I was like on a safari farm, and there was that very nice man who was asking, so where are you heading next? And I said, well, I'm heading to the dunes, to the desert. I want to see that famous Dune 45, and then I want to go to the Sossus Valley, to the Dead Valley, which is like amazing. And always when I saw pictures from there, it looks like it's like a dry salt pan with just the sand and those old trees which are like thousands years old, and they refuse to die because it's too dry there. So it's like almost surreal, another planet landscape. Like when you're looking at the pictures from Sossus Valley, from the Dead Valley, you just see those.
I've seen those pictures. It looks incredible. Yeah.
just surrounded. So I was like, yeah, that's the place I want to go. And then, of course, in Namibia, it's not so easy to travel. Most of the people are, taking the things professionally. They will rent a 4x4 car and with the GPS navigation, satellite radio. Of course, me being cheap and Polish, I'm like, yeah, I will go to the car rental, and I pick up the cheapest car, which they probably felt that I'm going to be driving around Windhoek. Yeah. It was Nissan Almera, which till today, I think that's the greatest car, and that's not a commercial statement. They don't pay me to say that, even though they should. So I picked up that car, which was like the cheapest. Nobody asked me where I'm heading. And then before I left, the guy I was staying in their property, the Safario place, he told me, listen, if you really want to take a scenic road, like something which will take your breath away, I'm like, oh yeah, sure, that's what I'm doing. He's like, give me the map. So, this old-fashioned, paper map, like I used to love to travel before. And he just draws me the, a line, like, so that's the map. Take that road there. Don't take that main road. Go this road. You will see beautiful scenery. And once on the top and this point, you will think about me. Like, you will say, wow, I've never saw something like that. So I'm like, great. So I'm living in Windhoek. And I was planning actually to stop on some gas station to get some more, food and water for the road, because it was supposed to be like 6 hours. He told me that the road's going to be bad, but I'm like, well, how bad it can be. I drove in Cuba. I drove everywhere, I'm from Europe. We have bad roads there, so I'm fine. And so I left Windhoek. He didn't know what kind of car I was. Probably, for sure, he thought that I'm going to rent a 4x4, some big Toyota, and otherwise he would never suggest me that road. So I went to the car rental. I take my little blue Nissan, and you need to know that most of the cars which you see there on the road, they're white, like they're those white SUVs. Mine was blue. I was the only blue car. Yeah, the only small and blue dot in Namibia. And of course, Margarita thought that she's going to be fine, and she's going to just buy more water and food on the thing. I eat something, got some breakfast, and I think I have some junk food. I have some little bar, and I have iced tea, that like a little, half a liter bottle, and that's it. Well, I start driving, and I'm looking at that map, like taking the turnings until I will get out of the road. And then once you get out from the Windhoek highway, the road's starting to get bad. And then it's starting to get worse. And then it's just a gravel road, and like really bad gravel road. So imagine driving for 7 hours. You cannot go faster than like 20 kilometers per hour because people get tired, or you just not go anywhere. But, still I'm thinking like, well, I see some points on the map with the names. So I'm assuming that there are cities, with the gas station, my Western thinking, when I can fuel it up. But thank God, at least I put the fuel like full. Right. And I start to drive. I'm driving. After, already I think 30 minutes, the radio goes off because there's no signal. People are only using satellite radio. So I'm thinking, great. So that's going to be me singing for a few hours in order to fall asleep. But, I'm in a good spirit. And because I'm driving slow, so I'm like recording the video. So I'm saying, oh, Mom, this is where I am. I'm showing the road. I'm having fun, I'm singing, And then, it gets like a little bit more sketchy because, first of all, in Namibia, when you're driving, you don't have the signs on the road like you usually have in every other country. Like, for example, when you are going to Sydney to Australia, you will see like Sydney, 200 kilometers. Then you're approaching a little bit more and you say Sydney, 150 kilometers. And then you see Sydney, 100 kilometers. At least you're on the right direction on the way.
Yes, it's very reassuring to see those signs.
Yeah, they don't have something like that. So they don't have socially 500 miles and then 600 to 400 to go. No. So they're only the numbers on the road. So I'm trying to look at my map, which at the end turns out not to be a very good map. They told me that there was like a store map, and for the trip which I took, actually, I should have much better map. So I have no phone. There's no signal. There is no radio. I have that battle, but I'm feeling optimistic until it's like I think 2 or 3 of those marks on the map, which were according to me will be cities with the gas stations and all that. No, there's nothing. There's like just one extra tree, and there's like a desert. There's nothing around. And the road started to get like really rough. I had like a hills which I have to go with almost 60 degrees with the car up. I'm like, I don't know if that car goes like that, but you know what? The car was great. I was doing that. And I think I got to that point where I said, oh my God, it's so beautiful. But that was actually the point as well, which I was starting to feel a little bit like, I haven't seen a car on this road for like past 4 hours.
Oh, wow.
Maybe, you know what? Maybe that's the hour. It's not a rush hour. Maybe just that's not a popular road, but you know, for sure they are somewhere. Thank God it was not so hot. So I wasn't drinking that iced tea like crazy. And I was still saving since I realized that there will be probably no gas stations. But, you know, my spirit was getting a little bit lower. And after 5 hours of driving and like jumping on the seat on that gravel road, like your back hurts. You are like, oh my God, how much longer? And you don't know how much longer. First of all, you don't know if you took the right road because there's no signs telling you that. Just, you know, according to your map, you must be going, but there's a desert around. So like, there's nothing.
You can't really tell. You're in the middle of nowhere.
And yeah, I could go back, but then I got to that point when I'm looking at that little sign which shows you how much gas you have left, how much fuel you have left. And I know that that's not enough fuel to go back. So I better, you know,
keep going and hope something's ahead of you. Oh, no.
And then I remember I got to that point which was looking a little bit more green. And then the road was like going down and then up. So it was like creating a little niche and there was a water there. So it wasn't like a river floating, but, you know, I stopped the car and I started to be a little, you know, MacGyver here. So I'm like, I need to check how deep is the water because I don't know how actually theoretically car can go through the water. I'm like, it's like the half of the wheel. Like, so I go to the nearest bushes. I pick up like a piece of wood. I'm sticking it there. I'm like, okay, it's just like, you know, a few centimeters should be fine. But, you know, in the middle was like much higher. It was like a meter or so, but it was like a good half a meter. Right. So I'm like, well, I get stuck here. But then I look, there are like 2 cows there on the side of the road. Somewhere there were like little bushes. And I'm thinking, okay, there are cows here. If there are cows here, someone must have brought that cows here at some point.
There must be people.
Yeah, somewhere. There must be people. They are coming back for those cows. So if something will happen, then I will just sit next to the cows and then, you know, wait. You know, they'll rescue me. So I got my spirit back. I brought some pieces of wood on the side on this huge paddle and was like more muddy because I didn't want to get stuck in mud. Because, you know, I cannot push my car at the same time and drive it.
No, that's right.
I built like a, you know, like a little bridge through the woods, and then I drove over and I was so happy.
Wow, well done.
Yes, I was so proud of myself, and I'm thinking like, hey, Margarita, I think you're stupid because, you know, what if under that hill there's another one which is even worse, and then you're going to be stuck, and there's no even cows there. So you lost your point. You should stay with the cows. But I'm like, no, keep going. So long story short, I finally made it when it was already getting dark. And when it's getting dark in that area, you stop driving because you cannot see anything. There's no lights on the road. There's no lights anywhere. And I was staying in a beautiful lodge, which was like a little bit deeper in a desert, but you could see it, like there were a little mountainy area there. And then, so once I got to that road, to that lodge, all sweaty, the guy came down because if you don't have a 4x4 car, you cannot drive up. And I'm like, no, I can do it. I said, I can do it. I said, I was driving here through that road. I'm like, I can do it. This car can do it. He's like, did you? He's like, excuse me, where did you come from? I'm like, I came from Windhoek. He's like, with this car? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, whoa. He's like, I never saw a person with that. And I'm like, well, okay. So I went upstairs, you know, he showed me the tent, and then we meet in a so-called the lobby, which is another tent. And then so he's like, I was wondering, because you said that you took the dangerous, like, which road did you take? And I'm like, oh, let me show you. And I'm pulling out my map and I'm showing. He's like, you took this road? I'm like, yeah. He's like, with this car? I'm like, yeah. he's like, okay, let me just ask you, did you have like a food and water supply for like at least 3 days? I'm like, he's like, have you seen any cars driving there? I'm like, no, I didn't know. I guess it was just like a slow day. So he's like, oh, listen, okay, so sit down. So I sit down and he's like, if something happened on that road, like if you got flat tire, which is like probably 90% possibility since you're driving Nissan Almera with the very bad tires on the gravel road, you could wait with the best scenario like 3 days for a car to pass. There's not road which is big. I got like almost fainted. Like I started like to get goosebumps. I'm like, oh my God. He's like, you should call like, the people from, you should call people from Guinness Book and tell them that you're the first Polish girl who drove that road in that car, and probably they will give you something. So it was funny at the end. But I told him, he's like, how did you do that? I'm like, you were not surprised that there's no cars? And I'm like, well, listen, it is what it is. I'm trying not to expect what it's familiar in my country or in where I'm usually traveling. I'm traveling to see, something different, not familiar,
exactly.
not expecting.
You don't know what the norm is. That's right. Oh my gosh.
He's like, are you good with the cars? Like, I'm like, probably I could not even change the tire. and he's like, wow, girl, you are the luckiest girl I ever met. I'm not thinking, like, I think I'm the stupidest one, but okay.
Well, I am glad that Margarita survived that Namibian adventure so that she could tell us the story to start with. And I have learned a lot from listening to it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed these 2 stories about close calls when travelling. I'd be keen to hear about any close calls you've had as well. Hop over to our Facebook group. It's called Thoughtful Travellers. If you search for Thoughtful Travellers in Facebook, you should find the link straight away. There's also a link in the show notes, so come across to the group and tell us about your close call there. Thank you very much again to our sponsor, Bokksu. You can find Bokksu at bokksu.com. That's BOKKSU. And they have all the info there about the yummy, yummy Japanese treats you could indulge in. Don't forget, if you use Thought 5, that's the word thought with the number 5 straight on, you can get $5 off your order. Thank you also to Pam Lynch. Her website where you can find her travel adventures is Travelling Bag, and that's at travellingbag.com.au. And I'll also leave a link in the show notes to her book, How the Hell Did I Get Here, which you can find on Amazon, and she's under Pamela Lynch there in case you are wondering. And lastly, I talked with Margarita from margaritagypsy.com, and she's also Margarita Gypsy on Instagram. All of this and more is in the show notes. The show notes for this episode will be at notaballerina.com/99. So yes, this was the 99th episode, which seems quite fun to me. And that means next episode, episode 100, is a bit special, and we're doing something a little bit different, but you will have to listen in next week to find out what that is. Thank you very much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.